Hello, my name is Sabrina, and for most of my life, I was the quiet one, easy to overlook, easier to dismiss. At my father's birthday party, I wore a sapphire necklace my grandmother left me. Nothing flashy, just something that made me feel seen. My sister laughed in front of everyone, called it cheap junk, and by the time the night was over, it had vanished. Then came the memes, the silence, the message. If something worthless disappears, why make a scene? But what if the necklace wasn't worthless? And what if the theft wasn't the beginning, but the final straw in a family that never really saw me at all? What happens when the one they always silenced speaks? The scent of grilled sea bass and lemon zest drifted from the outdoor kitchen, mixing with the faint salt of the ocean breeze. It was the kind of golden California evening people posted about. Warm, photogenic, perfectly choreographed to look spontaneous. My father's 70th birthday had brought together the usual suspects, our family, his business partners, a few retired surgeons from his golf club, and of course, my sister's entourage. I arrived precisely on time, not fashionably late like Callista always did, nor early enough to be roped into helping out like in years past. I wore the necklace. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. A deep blue sapphire hung from a white gold chain, understated, elegant. It had belonged to my grandmother, Evelyn, who used to tell me I had eyes sharp enough to spot truth buried in stone. The necklace had never been appraised. It was never about price. It was about her and me and the one person in this family who looked at me and didn't see the extra. I kept to myself mostly, drifting between conversations, smiling politely at stories I'd heard before. I wasn't there to outshine anyone. I just wanted to be seen, for once, not as the afterthought, but as someone worth a second glance. Then came Callista. Wearing a dress that could have doubled as a red carpet gown, she breezed in with perfect timing, pausing just long enough near the entrance to let everyone absorb her arrival. Her makeup was flawless, her nails painted like she'd never had a dishwashing moment in her life. People clapped. My father beamed. She hugged everyone like she'd invented affection, then sauntered up to me, her voice just loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "Oh, Sabrina, is that your jewelry, or did someone lose a charm from a vending machine?" She smirked, not even bothering to wait for a reaction. Laughter. Not a roar, but enough. A chuckle from a cousin. A smirk from Uncle Pete. I caught the eye of a woman I didn't recognize. She looked down quickly. I felt it then. The heat rising behind my ears. The sharp, invisible knife of public humiliation. But I didn't flinch. I didn't even touch the necklace. That would have been surrender. I just smiled and said, "It was a gift," before walking away, pretending not to hear the second wave of soft laughter that followed. Later that night, after the cake, after the toasts, after everyone had posed for photos where I stood slightly off to the side, I drove home with the kind of silence that didn't need music. My apartment was cool and quiet, untouched by curated smiles and champagne. I set my purse down, took off my heels, and went to remove the necklace. Except, it wasn't there. I froze. I always stored it in the inner coat lining when I traveled with it. A small velvet box tucked away, hidden from eyes and fingers. But it was gone. I checked my purse, the car, my jacket pockets, the bathroom counter. Nothing. My hands began to tremble. I called my cousin Marlene, who'd helped clean up earlier. "Hey, it's probably nothing," I began, trying to keep my voice light. "But did you see a sapphire necklace? I think it might have slipped off, or—" "Oh, Sabrina," she interrupted, laughing lightly. "You and your dramatics. It was probably some costume piece, right? Don't stress over $5 flair." I said nothing. I just thanked her and hung up. It was almost midnight. I sat on the edge of my bed, the room dim except for the soft glow of my bedside lamp. I should have cried, but I didn't. Instead, I stared at the wall and tried to remember every moment of the party. Had I removed it? Had someone bumped into me? Had I forgotten? But no, I remembered clearly. I remembered Callista reaching out to fix my hair, brushing the chain briefly with her fingers. I remembered her saying, "It's barely noticeable anyway." I didn't sleep that night, not because of the necklace, but because of what losing it confirmed. No one noticed, no one cared. And if they had taken it, It was because they assumed it wasn't worth anything. The next morning, I reached for my phone, eyes still puffy from staring at nothing all night. That's when I saw it. A new message in the family group chat. It was a meme. A photo of a child wearing plastic princess jewelry, overlaid with bold text. When you lose your $5 necklace and act like the crown jewels were stolen. Posted by my cousin Nate, liked by Callista. I didn't cry, not then, but something shifted, quietly, deeply, and it wasn't going back. I didn't respond to the meme, I didn't delete it either. I just stared at it, let it linger like stale perfume. The image, cheap plastic necklace on a child's neck, glitter smeared across her cheek like a crown of ridicule, was clearly meant for me. The caption read, $5 royalty? My cousin Nate had posted it. Underneath, a trail of laugh reacts followed. My father's thumbs up. My mother's so true. Callista, of course, didn't comment. She never needed to. Her silence was always her signature. I took a screenshot. I didn't send it to anyone. Didn't say a word in the chat. Just tucked it into a folder I'd recently created on my phone titled Receipts. I'd learned from past mistakes that people like my sister only respected silence if it could come back to bite. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I made coffee not because I needed caffeine, but because it gave me something to do with my hands. I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through the rest of the group chat, noting how not one person had checked in on me after the party, not even to pretend. It wasn't just about the necklace. It was about what it revealed. The casual cruelty my family had normalized for so long. The way they laughed off my hurt, as if the idea of me being hurt was funny in and of itself, as if the mere suggestion that something I owned might be valuable or meaningful was absurd. At noon, I showered, changed into something presentable, and headed to the office. Mondays were slow. I worked for a private insurance firm that specialized in high-value assets, fine art, luxury watches, rare gemstones. I reviewed appraisals, verified authenticity, updated valuations for clients who lived in worlds I'd never touch. Funny, isn't it? I was trusted to verify $100,000 emeralds, but when it came to my own family, I was accused of clinging to costume jewelry. Around 2:15 that afternoon, I was halfway through verifying a series of estate diamond earrings when my phone rang. The name on the screen made me pause. Jenna Valente. We hadn't spoken in at least 3 years. We met during our gemologist certification training. She had a sharp eye and an even sharper memory. I hesitated, then answered. Sabrina Rayner, I said. A pause, then, wow, still so formal. Hey, it's Jenna. Hey, I replied, unsure where this was going. So, random question, she said. At your dad's birthday last weekend, were you wearing a deep blue sapphire? Oval cut, white gold setting? My throat tightened. Yeah. Why? She exhaled into the phone. Someone I follow posted a short video from the party. I saw a flash of the necklace before the story got taken down. That's not costume. If it's what I think it is, that stone's a cashmere salon cut. Probably low 6 figures. I swallowed hard. You're sure? Dead sure, she said. It had that slight violet undertone, very rare. I only noticed because I appraised something similar last month for a private collector in Santa Barbara. My voice was flat. Well, it's missing now. A pause. Oh. Yeah, I said, forcing myself to sound unfazed. No one's taken it seriously. They think it's a knockoff. They're wrong, Jenna said quietly. And if you ever need a second signature or support, I've got you. We hung up. I didn't go back to the diamonds. Instead, I left the office early and drove home, heart pounding. Once inside, I headed straight to the small safe in my bedroom closet. I spun the dial slowly, deliberately, like I was preparing for a moment I knew would change everything. The folder was there, sealed in a clear envelope, labeled EV, Evelyn's estate. I carried it to the living room, sat cross-legged on the floor, and opened it. Inside, neatly folded, was the certified appraisal form dated March 12, 2003. Salon-cut cashmere sapphire, 8.7 carats. Estimated valuation, $117,000, signed by an independent appraiser. Insured under Evelyn Rayner's Legacy Trust. Beneficiary, Sabrina Ann Rayner. There was no ambiguity, no misinterpretation. I stared at the document for a long while, letting the truth sink in. Not just the monetary value, but the confirmation that my grandmother had meant for me to have something precious, something real. And they all knew. My mother, my father, Callista. Even her husband, a family attorney, had glanced over the estate summary at the time. They hadn't forgotten. They'd just chosen not to remember. It wasn't ignorance, it was erasure. I slid the documents back into the envelope, careful not to crease the paper, and placed it back in the safe. Then I stood, walked to my desk, and opened my laptop. I stared at the blank email draft for several minutes before typing. Subject: To whom it may concern, legal inquiry regarding personal asset theft. I didn't send it yet, but the cursor blinked back at me like a dare. That night, I couldn't sleep. Again. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the glow from the hallway nightlight casting faint lines across the white paint. Every moment from the party looped in my mind like a scene I wished I could rewrite. Callista's fingers brushing my collarbone under the guise of fixing my necklace, her casual smirk, the weight of people's laughter. I'd let it go too many times, the teasing, the microaggressions, the assumption that because I didn't speak up, I didn't have anything to say. But that night, something changed, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, inside me. I got up, padded into the living room, and poured myself a glass of water. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened a second folder on my computer. This one I titled, Truth They Won't Acknowledge Yet. And I began uploading everything I had. The email draft still sat unsent when I walked into my closet. I wasn't even sure why I went in there, maybe to get some air, or maybe just to move. My hands were restless. I needed to do something with them. I found myself staring at the old cedar chest shoved into the back corner, hidden behind a row of off-season coats I hadn't touched in a year. The scent hit me first, lavender, worn cedar wood, and a hint of something that made me think of Grandma Evelyn's living room in the fall. I knelt down, brushed away the light layer of dust that had settled on the lid, and opened it. Inside, the contents were exactly as I remembered. Her hand-knit scarves, yellowed recipe cards written in her confident cursive, a broken brooch she never got around to fixing. And beneath it all, an envelope, cream-colored, thick. My name was written across the front in ink that had faded just slightly, but still held its shape. For Sabrina, if I'm not around. I took a breath and opened it, hands shaking, though I wasn't sure why. I hadn't even realized she'd left me anything besides the necklace. The paper crackled softly as I unfolded it, and then there it was. Her voice, in her words. My darling girl, if you're reading this, I'm not with you anymore. And that breaks my heart. I've always watched you, quiet, observant, stronger than they knew. You didn't yell to be heard, you listened. And when you did speak, it was always something worth hearing. That is a gift, Sabrina. Don't let them tell you otherwise. They never asked what you needed. You gave without being asked, and they took without giving back. That necklace, yes, it's valuable, but that's not why I gave it to you. I gave it to you because it belonged to someone who never needed a spotlight to shine. Just like you. Callista always needed attention. You, my dear, simply needed to be seen. Love, Grandma. Evelyn. I read it 3 times before I allowed myself to feel it. I cried, but not the loud, gut-wrenching sobs, just slow, quiet tears that slid down my cheeks like they'd been waiting years to fall. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, I didn't feel angry. I felt understood. I folded the letter carefully and set it aside. Then I went back to the safe and pulled out the appraisal again, placed it next to the letter, and laid both down on my desk under the soft lamplight. There was something grounding about seeing them side by side. The cold, hard proof, the legal document that spoke in numbers and weight, and the soft, personal truth, handwritten by someone who had seen me even when I felt invisible. I printed a copy of the appraisal, scanned the letter, and added them both to a new digital folder titled Proof, Legal. Then, I took a breath and opened another tab. Screenshots from the group chat, every mocking meme, every comment that dismissed my voice, dragged in, photos from the party, including a blurry one showing Callista behind me during the toast, her hand awkwardly near my collarbone, my signed insurance registration from the original estate packet. All of it went in. The folder filled, line by line, like pieces of a puzzle that no longer made me question if I was overreacting. I wasn't. I had been dismissed, disrespected, and now I had evidence. Not to start a war, but to end the narrative that I was making this up. The sky outside darkened gradually, shifting from pale amber to deep navy as I sat in silence, watching the upload progress bar crawl across the screen. A sense of calm replaced the raw ache I'd been carrying since that night. I picked up Evelyn's letter again and traced her handwriting with my finger. The curls of her S's, the steadiness of her lines. It felt like she was there beside me, reminding me I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't wrong for wanting to protect something that mattered. My last memory of her was a quiet afternoon, 6 months before she passed. She'd invited me over for tea. Just me, not Callista, not anyone else. She'd made her favorite lemon bars and served tea in mismatched porcelain cups. We'd talked about books, the weather, her neighbors' cats. Nothing profound on the surface, but toward the end, she reached across the table, gently took my hand and said, "I wish more people saw you the way I do." I didn't know what to say at the time. I just smiled. But that sentence has lived inside me ever since. I returned the letter to its envelope, slid it back into the cedar chest, and closed the lid with care. Later that evening, I reheated some leftover soup and sat on the couch, legs curled beneath me, laptop open again. I clicked through the proof, legal folder, double-checking everything. It wasn't about revenge, it was about acknowledgement, about not being erased. Around 10 p.m., I was shutting down for the night when my phone buzzed with a new notification. A calendar invite. Title: Family Dinner Time, Sunday, 6:00 p.m. Location: Home. Sent by Dad. No note, no explanation, no apology. I stared at the screen for a long while. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but I didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, I let the screen dim and rested the phone face down on the coffee table. Some part of me knew they were going to pretend nothing had happened. And another part of me was ready for that. The clip finished uploading just before midnight. I watched the progress bar disappear and sat back in my chair, the silence in my apartment suddenly deafening. I didn't know what I'd do with the video yet, whether I'd send it to the group, to a lawyer, or just let it sit there in its quiet defiance, but I knew one thing: it existed now. The truth was no longer something I carried alone in my head. It had weight, pixels, timestamps. I closed the laptop and stood, stretching out the tension in my shoulders. I was halfway to brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed again. Calendar invite. From my father. Family dinner. This Sunday at 6 p.m. Home. No message, no subject line. Just an automated invite from a man who had, not 48 hours ago, liked a meme mocking me in front of the entire family. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. The audacity would have been impressive if it hadn't been so painfully familiar. Sunday arrived faster than I expected. I debated canceling, more than once, but there was something about it that felt like a test, and I was tired of failing theirs, so I dressed simply. No necklace this time, just a dark blouse and a blazer. I packed the appraisal documents, the insurance forms, and Evelyn's letter into a folder and slipped it into my bag like armor. I pulled into the driveway at 5:50 p.m. The house looked exactly the same: manicured hedges, white trim, porch light on a timer, comfortable, sterile, controlled, like everything my parents had ever curated. I stepped inside without ringing the bell. The door was already ajar. No one greeted me. From the dining room, I heard the low hum of casual chatter and the clink of silverware against fine china. The house smelled like rosemary chicken and fresh bread. Everything choreographed, as always. I hung my coat on the rack, adjusted my posture, and walked in. Callista sat at the center of the table, glowing like a showroom dummy in a cream cashmere wrap. My mother flanked one end of the table, my father the other, sipping his usual red blend with a content expression. The rest of the seats were filled with familiar faces, relatives who never spoke unless prompted, and even then, only in socially approved sentences. "Look who finally showed," Callista said with a tight smile, as if my presence had thrown off her tempo. I didn't respond. I nodded to the room and took the empty seat left for me, second from the end, far from the center. Dinner began with meaningless updates. Someone's dog had surgery. My uncle had switched insurance providers. My father talked about a golf tournament he'd been watching. No one mentioned the necklace, not one word, as if it had never happened. I let them speak. I didn't interrupt. I waited. When the table reached that inevitable lull, the pause where everyone checks to see if dessert is coming, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I set it gently in the center of the table and opened it. No preamble, no announcement. The appraisal sat on top, crisp and official. Beneath it, the insurance documents. And then, in Evelyn's unmistakable handwriting, her letter. Callista's fork stopped mid-air. My father cleared his throat. My mother's eyes flicked from the paper to me, then quickly back to her wine. "This again?" Callista said, the corner of her mouth twitching like she wanted to laugh but couldn't quite commit. I met her gaze. "This always, because no one else is willing to say it." Elaine sighed softly, almost regretfully. "Callista was just joking at the party, dear. You always take things so seriously." I turned to my father. "You signed the transfer paperwork. You saw the valuation. You knew what Evelyn left me." He blinked slowly. "If it was so valuable," he said, "why wear it to a party? Seems careless." I looked down at the table, then back at them all. "Because I wanted to feel like I belonged, for once, like I was part of something that mattered to this family." Silence fell over the room. Not the uncomfortable kind, the kind that settles like dust after something breaks. Callista reached for her wine and swirled it lazily. "I don't recall seeing any necklace. Perhaps someone else took it. You know how chaotic these events can be." I smiled tightly. "The video says otherwise, but I'll let that speak for itself soon." Her fingers stilled. For a split second, something passed across her face. Doubt. Maybe. Fear. Then it was gone. My mother shifted in her chair. "Sabrina, this isn't the time or place." "No," I said, standing. "This is exactly the time and place, because if I don't say this here, I never will." My father stood too, as if trying to re-establish control of the room. "Let's not ruin a perfectly nice dinner." "It was already ruined," I replied. "You just didn't notice because it wasn't your plate that was empty." And with that, I picked up the folder, tucked it back into my bag, and left the room. I didn't storm out. I didn't slam doors. I walked through the hall, past the portraits, past the curated family smiles, and stepped into the night. Outside, the air was cool. Not cold, but enough to clear my head. I got in my car and sat in the driver's seat, hands resting on the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I didn't feel rage. What I felt was clarity. They weren't going to change. They weren't going to acknowledge what had happened, not unless they were forced to, and I was done begging. Back at home, I poured myself a glass of water, opened my laptop, and clicked on the folder titled "Truth They Won't Acknowledge Yet." Then I uploaded the video, not to social media, not to a group chat, to a private, time-stamped storage file with a shareable link and a password-protected log. Let them laugh now. Their silence was my answer. The notification lingered on my screen. Subject: Asset Theft Case. Preliminary Steps. It didn't surprise me. Ellison didn't just offer support for show. He moved. Quietly, efficiently, like someone who'd seen too many people backpedal under family pressure. I clicked the email open. It was from a friend of his at a boutique legal firm in La Jolla. A woman named Dana Voss. Short, to the point. "Hi, Sabrina. Ellison brought your case to my attention. I've reviewed the documentation. If you're ready to proceed, I suggest we begin with a formal filing of theft, including the submitted footage and inheritance records. Attached is an intake form. No pressure, but whenever you're ready. All best, Dana Voss, JD. I sat there for a long time, rereading the email in silence. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was real. Tangible. It had moved past group chats and family dinners, past eye rolls and gaslighting. It was now a line in the sand. I didn't reply right away. I closed the laptop slowly, letting the soft click of the lid act like punctuation on the moment. That evening, after dinner, I changed into a hoodie and pulled my hair into a messy bun. I needed to see the footage again. Needed to remind myself that I wasn't inventing this, that I wasn't being dramatic or too sensitive, like they always said. I opened the folder, clicked on the file labeled partyfootage.mov, and watched it roll. It was grainy, filmed by someone's phone, clearly not intended to catch what it did. The guest filming had been standing near the fireplace, focusing on my father making a speech. Everyone was gathered, glasses raised, smiles plastered. In the background, barely noticeable at first, was me, talking to Aunt Rhonda, and behind me, Callista. She slid in, seemingly adjusting my hair, laughing as she did it. But the hand that moved toward my shoulder dipped just slightly. A quick motion, a flick of her fingers, and then, gone. She turned, and her clutch was in her other hand, slightly fuller. Time-stamped. Clear. Undeniable. I didn't need narration. I didn't need to defend what was visible. This time, I didn't hesitate. I downloaded the video file, opened a fresh email, and addressed it to 3 recipients: Arthur Rayner, Elaine Rayner, and Callista Verne. Subject: formal evidence submission, private family incident. No message, just the clip. I attached the letter from Evelyn, the appraisal, the photos. Then I hit send. That was it. I pushed back from the desk, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My hands trembled, not with fear, but release. I had finally said it out loud, in the way that mattered. The silence that followed was thicker than anything I'd felt in the house growing up. No reply that night. No, let's talk. No, what is this? Not even a curt, dismissive emoji. Just silence. The next morning I checked the email. All 3 had been opened. Still nothing. By the second day, the group chat went quiet. No memes, no passive-aggressive, just checking-in messages. No subtle digs, just a digital void. Until Callista's Instagram story. A photo of her sipping wine by her pool, captioned in elegant script font. Some people get bitter instead of better. I rolled my eyes, took a screenshot, added it to the folder. Legal, in motion. Ellison messaged me that evening. Saw Callista's post. What's happening? I didn't sugarcoat it. I sent him the clip. No explanation, no context. 30 seconds later, you're not crazy, and you're not alone. Then a follow-up. If you decide to escalate, I'll stand with you. I stared at those words longer than I expected. The phrasing caught me. Not I'll protect you, not I'll fix this, just I'll stand with you. I didn't realize how much I'd needed that. No fanfare, no savior complex, just quiet, steady presence. I didn't write back. Instead, I opened my laptop again and created a new folder titled Legal in Motion. Everything went in. Every file, every screenshot, every scan. Evelyn's letter, the insurance records, the video, the photos, the meme, Callista's story. A digital archive of being erased and reclaiming space. Then I sat back and stared at it, feeling something shift deep inside me. Let them sit with their silence. I'd made my move. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even hurt. It was strategy. I wouldn't scream in their faces. I wouldn't beg them to do what they never intended to do. Instead, I would let the evidence speak louder than my voice ever had. Just as I was about to shut down for the night, my screen blinked with a new notification, a name I didn't recognize. From Dana Voss. Subject: Asset Theft Case, Preliminary Steps. I opened it. She outlined the process, explained next steps, asked for a preferred timeline, mentioned the strength of the video. Then she added one final line. When they assume you won't do anything, doing something is a full sentence. The folder felt heavier than paper. Tucked under my arm as I walked into Dana Voss's office, it seemed to carry not only the documents but every word they never let me say. The space smelled faintly of eucalyptus and leather, minimalist decor, glass walls, firm rugs underfoot, clean, professional, and not a single trace of my family. She greeted me in a tailored navy dress, her hand extended firmly. Sabrina, welcome. Come in. Let's get to work. I sat, spine straight, legs crossed, every muscle aware of itself. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about air, about breathing freely for the first time since the party. She opened the folder slowly, reviewing each page without commentary. The appraisal, the video stills, screenshots of the group chat, Evelyn's letter, Callista's social media story, all lined up like facts in a courtroom I hadn't entered yet. When she looked up, she didn't blink. We'll file for asset theft, defamation, and emotional distress, she said, her voice crisp. Given the clear evidence and the value of the piece, this is a strong case. You okay with this becoming official? I nodded. I didn't start this, but I'm ending it. Dana smiled faintly, like someone who'd heard those words said too late before. Then we begin today. It was Thursday. That Sunday, I found myself pulling into the family driveway again. The house hadn't changed, still picture-perfect from the outside, still emotionally hollow within. I hesitated before stepping out. Not out of fear, but out of resolve. I needed to be clear, calm, collected. There wouldn't be another conversation. This was it. Inside, the dining room was already buzzing. Callista, of course, sat in her usual spot. She wore a sage green dress this time, soft curls carefully arranged, diamond studs winking from her ears. Beside her, my parents were mid-conversation with Aunt Joanne about patio renovations. I walked in unannounced. No one stood to greet me. Callista glanced up, her smile tight. Came to stir more drama. You always find a way to make it about you. I set my folder on the table and opened it without responding. Arthur, my father, barely looked up. You've always been the one who can't let go of little things. I met his gaze directly. This isn't about a thing. This is about the principle. I unfolded the contents with deliberate calm, like a surgeon prepping for incision, appraisal on top. Then the legal statement, screenshots, video stills. I'm filing by Friday, I said, voice steady. If the necklace is returned in full condition, I will reconsider further action. If not, it becomes legal. Callista scoffed. You wouldn't dare. Family doesn't take family to court. I looked her straight in the eyes. You stopped being family the moment you stole from me and laughed about it. She blinked. No smirk, no comeback. For once, her mouth had no script to follow. Elaine cleared her throat. Honey, let's not do this here. I am doing it here, I said, turning to her. Because every time you told me not to make a scene, you gave permission to the ones who did. The room fell into a silence so deep it almost felt like an earthquake. Not loud, but everything shifted. Just then, the front door opened. Ellison. He walked in uninvited, carrying nothing but his own quiet confidence. He wore a dark button-down and that slight crease between his brows he always had when he smelled injustice. Sabrina's not alone anymore, he said, addressing the room like a press conference. He looked directly at Arthur. You taught her to be quiet. Now you'll learn how loud the truth can be. My father straightened. Not defensively, just uncomfortably. Ellison continued. We've reviewed the footage, the letter, the documentation. We have legal support. And no amount of ignoring it will change what happened. I didn't look at anyone as I said, I'm not asking for your blessing. I'm giving you a final chance to do what's right. No one responded, no denial, no apology, just silence, heavy, telling. I closed the folder, slipped it back into my bag, and turned to leave. Back in my car, I sat for a moment, engine off, both hands on the steering wheel. I didn't cry, didn't shake, I exhaled. Monday morning, I walked into Dana's office with the same folder. The label now read, Rainer v. Verne, Theft, Defamation, emotional distress. She glanced at the label, then at me. Ready? I nodded. No more permission. It had been less than 72 hours since I walked out of Dana's office, folder in hand, case officially filed. The sun hadn't risen or set differently. The mail still arrived late, but something in the air shifted, an undercurrent. Quiet, but palpable. Like the moment right before the power goes out and everything pauses, just for a second. That morning, I was making coffee when my phone buzzed 3 times in rapid succession. I glanced down. News alerts. Civil family dispute between 2 sisters, one claiming theft of a family heirloom valued over $250,000. I nearly dropped the mug. Local news. A daytime segment with soft jazz in the background and a warm-toned anchor introducing it like it was a lifestyle piece. Family Feud, Jewel Edition. The graphic flashed between old stock images of sapphires and blurred footage of me at the party. And then, Callista. Perfectly lit, carefully composed. I just think it's heartbreaking, she told the camera. Family matters should be handled with grace. I've always tried to keep peace, but some people just want attention. I watched the screen, my jaw locked. She had leaked the lawsuit, framed the entire thing as an outburst from the unhinged sister desperate for relevance. On her Instagram, she followed up with a post, a soft shot of her meditating on a sunlit patio, captioned, "Some sisters fight for attention, I fight for peace." There were already a few hundred comments, mostly in her favor, some strangers defending me, quoting back her old posts with skepticism. But the damage was done. She'd gone public. I didn't reply. Not to her, not to the media. I just added another file to the Legal in Motion folder. Public slander, media strategy. That evening, as I sat reviewing evidence to prep for Dana's next move, my phone lit up again. It was from Chloe, my niece. Callista's daughter. "Dee Dee, I saw Mom take your necklace. She said not to tell anyone. I'm sorry." I stared at the message for what felt like hours. Then another ping, an audio file. I played it, Chloe's voice, barely a whisper. I didn't know it was wrong at first. Mom said it was a prank, but I saw her put it in her clutch at the party. "She told me not to tell anyone or she'd take my phone. I'm really sorry." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I saved the file in a new folder labeled Witness, Family. I wasn't going to use it, not yet, but it existed now. Like everything else. Ellison called me that night. "She thinks she can smear you first," he said, no greeting necessary. "She has no idea what's coming." "She's afraid," I answered. "She's arrogant," he corrected. "Both," I said quietly. "Let her dig. The deeper she goes, the harder she'll fall." Dana called the next morning. "We're prepping for subpoenas, guest footage, event photographers, catering crew, anyone who might have captured peripheral shots. You okay with your name becoming part of the docket?" "I already lost everything that mattered in that family," I told her. "My name is all I have left." After the call, I stood in the middle of my apartment. The sunlight was soft that morning, filtered through the blinds like it was trying not to intrude. And still, my mind wandered, back to childhood. I remembered drawing sketches in my room, only to find them ripped to pieces when I returned from school. Callista had denied it, of course. "Why would I care about your ugly little drawings?" I remembered asking my parents about it, only to be met with, "Just let her have it, Sabrina. She's going through a lot. Don't make it worse." Years of being told to give in, to not make things harder, to keep the peace. But keeping the peace had always meant keeping my mouth shut. Now, silence was my loudest protest. I opened the legal folder again, reviewed Chloe's audio once more, and then added one final line to the case notes. "Intentional concealment by Callista Verne. Witness, minor. Statement preserved." That night, as I finished preparing a timeline for Dana, my phone buzzed again. It was from a number I didn't recognize, just one line. "Drop it now or lose everything." I stared at the message. No name, no punctuation, just threat wrapped in economy. I didn't flinch. I didn't block it. I screenshotted it. Then forwarded it directly to Dana with a note. "Received tonight at 9:04 p.m. Threat. likely from opposing party or affiliated source. Ellison texted a few minutes later. Want me to dig? No need, I typed. They just told me exactly how scared they are. And then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I opened the blinds completely. Let the night come in. The courthouse smelled like old wood, coffee, and something sterile, probably leftover tension from decades of legal grievances. As I stepped inside with Ellison by my side, I could feel the stillness in my chest shifting. Not nerves, just awareness. The awareness that I had crossed a threshold, one I could never step back over. There weren't many people in the gallery. A couple of reporters sat near the back with discreet notepads, pretending not to be there for the drama. Dana sat at the plaintiff's table, shuffling through documents with her usual calm. And then, across the room, Callista. She walked in like she was arriving at a gala, white blazer, tailored slacks, not a hair out of place. Her expression was unreadable, polished to the point of perfection. A PR advisor followed behind her, whispering something into her ear. Her attorney, a slick man in a pale gray suit, adjusted his tie and nodded toward the judge's bench. We didn't speak. We didn't exchange glances. We weren't sisters in this room. We were plaintiff and defendant. When the session began, the judge, a woman in her early 60s with reading glasses halfway down her nose, asked us to rise, then gestured for Dana to begin. Dana stood with the ease of someone who knew her case was airtight. Her voice was firm, but never raised. She laid out the facts with quiet authority. The necklace, the video, the inheritance documents, the appraisals, the media fallout. She paused, then placed a final envelope on the table. Your Honor, we also have a statement from a minor, Callista Verne's daughter, submitted under sealed witness protection, as advised by the court. A rustle swept across the room. Callista stiffened, her mouth tightening just enough to crack the mask she wore. Then it was my turn. I took a breath and stepped forward. I didn't come here today because I wanted attention, I began, eyes steady on the judge. I came because I wanted the truth to matter. This case isn't about jewelry, it's about legacy. It's about how families decide who matters and who doesn't. I unfolded Evelyn's letter and placed it in front of the judge. My grandmother saw me, when no one else did. I didn't cry. I didn't crack. Callista's attorney objected, tried to minimize the footage, question the valuation, imply confusion. But Dana countered every point with clarity and facts. No drama, no raised voices, just truth. When the ruling came, it was swift. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Sabrina Rayner. The defendant, Callista Verne, is ordered to return the stolen necklace within 7 business days, pay restitution for damages incurred, and issue a formal apology to be made publicly within 30 days. A hush fell over the room. Callista didn't move. Her face didn't flinch. But I saw it. The tiniest tremor at her jawline. The press didn't flood us outside. Just 2 microphones, 1 camera. Dana declined to comment. Ellison stood beside me, his presence enough. Callista walked past me without a word, her PR rep following like a shadow. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. 2 weeks later, the necklace arrived in a secure envelope delivered to my attorney's office. It looked exactly the same, but something in me had changed forever. I held it in my hand and didn't feel pride or vindication. I just felt done. That same week, Callista's brand, her carefully curated image, her speaking engagements, her influencer contracts began to crumble. Sponsors pulled out quietly, one by one, no official statements, just silence. But social media said what the legal system didn't. Stolen legacy, how truth matters. Justice for Sabrina. A national women's group reposted the story with the caption, "Believe quiet women." The backlash trickled from her brand into my parents' small chain of home furnishing shops. One major client backed out of a commercial contract. My father's voice, usually full of command, now sounded unsure. Then came the message from my mother. "Sabrina, can we talk? Just us?" I didn't reply. 3 days later, one more. "We need a favor, just a small loan. We're short with legal fees. We won't make it through the quarter." I stared at the message for a long time, then replied simply, "You taught me to be silent. Now let your silence teach you." No follow-up. Nothing. Until she showed up. Callista, at my door. No makeup. Hair pulled back. Expensive coat still draped over her shoulders like she couldn't decide whether to come in or walk away. I opened the door but didn't invite her inside. "You've ruined everything," she said. Her voice was hollow, like she didn't know whether to yell or beg. "Happy now?" I shook my head. "No. But I'm finally free." She stared at me, something sour curling her lip. "You were always the mistake. And yet I'm the one standing." I shut the door without slamming it. That would have been giving her something. Later that night, I opened my phone and quietly deleted the group chat that had haunted me for years. Every meme, every thread, every silence, gone. Then, I opened my laptop and created a new document. Title: Legacy Begins Here. The rain had stopped just before dawn, and when I stepped outside that morning, the world still shimmered with the evidence of it. Drops clung to the edges of the porch railing, each one catching the soft light like a bead of glass. The concrete path leading down to the gravel glistened under the pale gray sky. It smelled of damp earth and salt, that distinct blend you only find near the ocean. There was a quietness in the air, but not the kind that feels lonely. This was different. This stillness felt earned, like a truce between the chaos of the past and the tentative promise of the present. The kind of calm that doesn't come because things are perfect, but because I had finally stopped expecting them to be. It had been 5 months since the final ruling. Long enough for the newspapers to lose interest, long enough for the rumors to dull into silence, and long enough for the silence itself, from my family, from the people who once dictated my every move, to stop feeling like exile and start feeling like freedom. I stood on the porch of the little cottage I now called home, just a block and a half from the ocean in Encinitas, a place that didn't carry their fingerprints, their shadows, or their accusations. In front of me, the lavender I had planted in the spring was beginning to bloom, fragile purple blossoms opening themselves to the salt wind. I cupped a mug of hot tea in both hands and let the steam rise against my face. Here, no one knew me. No one called me too emotional. No one dismissed me as the quiet one. No one looked at me with that gaze that always seemed to measure how close I was to failing them. Anonymity, for the first time in my life, was a gift. I had chosen this place for a reason. Encinitas reminded me of Evelyn. She had always spoken of living by the sea one day, of waking to the sound of waves and falling asleep to the call of gulls. Her house, years ago, had carried the constant scent of lavender from the bushes she tended by her porch. The memory of her lingered in the salt air and the lavender buds outside my own window now. It felt right, as if I had circled back to something she'd once dreamed for me. 2 months earlier, I had signed the papers formally removing myself from the Rayner Family Trust. Notarized, filed, final. For some, it might have looked like a loss of money or security, but for me, it was liberation. It wasn't about the wealth. I'd learned the hard way how little wealth meant when tied to people who weaponized it. It was about reclaiming my story, declaring on paper that I would no longer be bound to them in name, in finances, or in expectation. I sent the certified letter to my parents' home without ceremony. Inside, I had written just one line. I'm choosing peace, not punishment. I forgive you, but I no longer belong to you. They never responded, and I never expected them to. Callista, of course, issued her statement through a publicist. It was bland, polished, stripped of any admission or humanity. I regret any misunderstanding that may have arisen regarding family matters. That was the best she could muster. A misunderstanding, as though my life had been nothing more than a clerical error. But by then, I didn't need her words to carry weight. I didn't need her to mean them, expecting decency from people who had shown me, over and over, who they truly were. That was a waste of breath. My days here became simple, slow, steady. I woke early, brewed tea, and wrote in my journal until the sun rose higher over the water. I walked the beach at low tide, collecting shells worn smooth by the ocean, and let the salt wind untangle the last knots of dread in my chest. I worked remotely for a nonprofit out of Santa Barbara, helping women rebuild their finances after escaping abusive families. The work wasn't glamorous, and it would never make headlines, but it mattered. Every time I helped someone open a bank account or untangle debts in her name, I felt a quiet kind of usefulness I hadn't known in years. Ellison came by now and then, never for long, never to stir up old wounds. He brought groceries once, another time a stack of secondhand books he thought I'd enjoy. On one visit, as we sat drinking coffee on the porch, he said something that stayed with me. "You fought back without screaming," he said, watching the horizon. "That's what shook them the most." I nodded. Screaming would have made it easy for them to dismiss me, to play the victim again. He looked at me for a long time, then added, "You scared them more by standing still." He wasn't wrong, but even now there were moments when the old ache returned. At the farmer's market, seeing a mother embrace her grown daughter, their laughter effortless, or overhearing sisters clinking glasses of wine, teasing each other with a familiarity I had never known. In those moments, some part of me still asked the old question, why couldn't that have been us? And every time, I reminded myself of the truth. I had spent decades trying to belong to a family that had no interest in making space for me, except in the narrow role they had scripted, the quiet one, the helper, the scapegoat when necessary, but never an equal, never someone whose presence was chosen, no more. Later that morning, after my walk, I opened Evelyn's letter again, the one I had read so many times that the paper had grown soft, though the ink remained bold. Her words were a balm I carried everywhere. "You, my dear, simply needed to be seen." I folded it carefully and placed it back in the wooden memory box on my shelf. Inside that box were the few artifacts I chose to keep. A photograph of Evelyn and me baking bread in her warm kitchen, the original insurance appraisal she'd left me, and a piece of sea glass I'd found on the beach my first week in Encinitas. On the lid, I had stuck a strip of masking tape with 3 words written in black ink. Not broken, just different, because that was the truth of it. I had not emerged unscarred. But scars do not mean you are shattered. Scars mean you endured, and I had come out of it whole. That afternoon, the familiar metallic clatter of the mailbox startled me. Barefoot, I walked down the gravel path, enjoying the cool dampness of the earth beneath me. Inside was a single envelope, handwritten, no return address, but the moment I saw the looping letters on the front, my breath caught. Chloe. I opened it slowly, heart thudding, bracing for whatever it might hold. Inside, just a few lines. Dee Dee, I want to know who you really are. Can we talk? Love, Chloe. I stood there a long time, letter trembling in my hand as the ocean breeze curled around me. For so long, I had believed legacy ended with truth, exposing it, naming it, refusing to let lies shape me anymore. But holding Chloe's letter, I realized something else. Legacy doesn't end with truth. It begins with who you choose to carry it forward. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to begin again. Sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from those who call you family. Sabrina's story reminds us that silence isn't always peace, and speaking up doesn't make you the problem. It makes you powerful. Have you ever had to walk away from people you once called your own? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about courage, betrayal, and reclaiming your worth.